All right, to finish up Unit 2, we're going to talk a little bit about financial planning compensation and a few different business models within the industry. So the first thing we're going to talk about are models in which firms get compensated. So we're going to talk about firm level, owner level, and employee level. So at the firm level, there are a couple of different compensation structures that firms can use. Sometimes they use these compensation structures independently, and sometimes they use them in combination. So fee only is probably the most common type of compensation models for CFP firms. Most CFP firms are called RIA firms. That's Registered Investment Advisory. They're firms that are registered with the SEC in compliance with providing professional advice for compensation. So fee-only models include assets under management, where firms might charge a percentage of the assets that they're managing for a client. A retainer model, where they charge a flat amount per year and provide comprehensive services for that flat retainer amount. An hourly amount, where they charge by the hour, or potentially even some subscription fees. There's some new platforms out there that are designed to be more accessible to people with lower levels of income or lower levels of net worth that still would benefit from financial planning advice. And so you can sign up and pay X number of dollars on a monthly basis, very similar to any other type of subscription, but get to work with a financial planning professional. Other firm level revenue generation models include commission only. Commissions are amounts paid for the sale of products. Fee-based, this is a combination of fee only plus commissions. And so in fee-based models, firms would be charging a fee for the advice that they're providing, and then a commission for the products that they sell based on that advice. This is a very popular model, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. And then fee offset. Fee offset is where a firm would charge a fee like they would under fee only, and then any commissions that were charged as part of the implementation of the plan would offset that fee, so that the client was paying a pretty fixed amount, even if they implemented products that were sold as part of implementation. An example of that, let's say that a firm says, hey, listen, our fee is $5,000. And as part of their recommendations, they say, hey, listen, you need to buy some life insurance and these investment products. Well, when they sell the client the life insurance and the investment products, it generates $1,000 worth of commission revenue. Well, the fee offset model, the firm would come in and say, hey, we're going to take our $5,000 fee and we're going to reduce that to $4,000 because we're also going to be collecting $1,000 in commissions, so that the total amount charged to the client still equals $5,000. Okay. Now, on the owner level, the compensation that they receive from the firm is probably going to come in the form of salary plus bonus, and then any distributions in relation to their ownership percentage of the firm. Okay, and then at the employee level, employees are making salary, and more often than not, they're also getting bonused on some metric. And the metric that employees are bonused on is generally dependent on the firm level compensation structure that they choose when working with clients. Then an employee in a sales related position might generate their income from commissions on sales. The biggest, like I said earlier, platform for generating revenue is assets under management. A common example of assets under management is a 1% fee for all assets managed by a firm. And so if a client brings $1 million under management for a firm, and the firm charges 1% on assets under management, then the fee to the client would be $10,000 per year. This is the dominant structure in the marketplace. And it's part of, if you recall from the previous slide, the overall fee only compensation model. Okay, we also see some other stuff, very, very fee only oriented as well: hourly fees, flat fees, retainers. And then you also have a product sales commission component that either a fully commissioned firm might be collecting revenue on, or one that is fee-based. Remember, fee-based are firms that are collecting fees for the advice that they provide and also commissions on sales. There's been a massive growth towards AUM. So if we just kind of look at the last 25 years or so in the industry, assets under management represented about $800 billion. And if you fast forward to, I mean, what is 8 years ago now, 4 trillion. I think the most recent number I heard on assets under management was almost double this amount in 2024. And so this has just been exponential growth towards this fee-based model. And if you think back to our previous lecture, this is because the fee-based model or the fee-only model is much more geared towards not product sales, but instead comprehensive, holistic, ongoing financial planning for a client. It provides a broader set of services. It requires more intimate knowledge of the client's preferences, and it's more ongoing with regards to helping the client meet their goals over the different seasons of their life. Now, just to break it down a little bit so that you have a better understanding of what compensation might look like at different levels in your career of being a financial advisor. Paraplanners, this is an entry-level position. Average total compensation, salary plus bonuses, is about $65,000. And that's pretty consistent with what we see coming out of our program. The average number of years that people spend in this role are about 4. I would say coming out of our program, we're seeing people in this paraplanner role anywhere from 2 to 4 years before they lead or before they ramp up to what we oftentimes call an associate planner or an associate advisor. That just sits in between an entry-level person and a lead advisor. But this is going to receive a big bump in pay. And what we're seeing for our firm is, or for our program, is that a lot of people are in this role until they have somewhere between 5 and 10 years of experience, right? Just depending on the firm, depending on their advancement, contribution, and a bunch of other factors while on the job. But things you can kind of expect here at the paraplanner role, you're really a big part of the behind the scenes planning process. But as you move up to an associate planner or a service advisor, now you're starting to manage some paraplanners to some extent and also working with clients in a more face-to-face way. And then when you progress on to the next thing, you become a lead advisor, a lead planner. These are people that are working directly with the clients to manage their situation. And they're oftentimes directing the efforts of the service advisors and the paraplanners to support the needs of that client. Again, another big bump. We're seeing people come into these lead advisor roles anywhere from 7 to 10 years into their career. And this is pretty consistent with the type of compensation that we're seeing for that role. And then a practicing partner. We're seeing people go into practicing partner anywhere from 10 to 15 years with being in a firm. And, the average compensation is this. It could definitely be lower than this, and the sky's the limit. But now you are really managing client relationships. You're probably developing new business and acquiring additional clients. You're overseeing the team of advisors below you. And then you're also making sure that the day-to-day operations of the business in some capacity are efficient and leading to the highest profitability for the business as possible, right? So those are the shareholder responsibilities that become extremely important in this role. So financial planning can be a great career, not only to earn a good living, but to earn a good living while helping people in a meaningful way. And this is just another graph that kind of illustrates the same thing that we just talked about. Well, you now have a pretty good feel for the financial planning process, how the CFP board thinks about the financial planning process, what each of its steps are, and some of the things that we do to engage with clients as we progress through the process. You also have a little bit better feel for some basics of the financial planning profession, how it works, how you get compensated. And now we're going to move on into Unit 3, and we're really going to start getting into the nuts and bolts of what does it look like to practice inside this financial planning process as a professional.